Hello, this is Benjamin Boyce, and welcome to the Voice of Reason podcast. Today's guest is Erec Smith, who is the author of A Critique of Antiracism in Rhetoric and Composition, The Semblance of Empowerment. Erec is a professor of rhetoric, which is basically the field of studying how to be a good communicator and what it is to communicate well. I hope I phrased that correctly. And he talks about the ways in which anti-racism as a dogma is kind of taking over that field of study, or interdepartmental, or not agency, but the ways in which that field is communicating with itself. We also talk about his life as a black man growing up in a predominantly white area of America, and then going to a mixed black and white and racial school, and then finding that he doesn't fit in with any tribe, and he then turns to critical thinking to make his way through the world. I know, crazy, isn't that? We talk about why he thinks critical thinking is better than critical theory, and a host of other things. So I will get out of the way now. Here is Erec Smith. How's your day going?
It's going okay. I'm in Rhetoric and Composition, and yesterday there was a manifesto sent to all members of a certain organization. And it's titled, "This Ain't Another Statement, This is a Demand for Black Linguistic Justice."
Okay.
Yeah. And, the general idea I agree with. Black English is, a legitimate dialect with grammar conventions and a register and things like that. But, they weren't an appointed committee. They just got together and decided they were going to speak for all black people, which is a problem for me. And secondly, there's this idea of black consciousness and things like that, and no consideration for the addition of a dialect like Standard English to one's repertoire, right? Which could come in handy in professional and civic contexts, right? And not even a strict Standard English, like what's typically called language of wider communication in my field, which is, the way we talk, the way I'm talking to you right now. I may split an infinitive. You know what I mean? I may end a sentence with a preposition, right? That's not Standard English, but it is language of wider communication. That is deemed inherently racist if it's expected of black students.
Okay.
By this committee. So that just happened.
Yeah, and that was released yesterday?
Yes.
And so this is something that I noticed, and I went to college, to a very progressive college, and I went later in life, and I graduated 3 years ago. And I attempted to become a writing tutor, but there was this whole layer of social justice in that relationship about me not correcting any grammar or directing anybody to reform or, improve toward the standard. And so I found that untenable to actually engage in that if I can't actually work on a skill with somebody. I don't know what we're working about anymore, or working on.
Right. And that's what's missing from a lot of this activism. There's no real plan about how the classroom is going to change, right? What exactly are we teaching? Here's the thing about Black English, or what's called code meshing, combining, one dialect with a language of wider communication or something like that. That's a rhetorical and contextual decision that our students are able to make on their own. You don't teach it. You gauge your audience and you speak or write accordingly, right? That's supposed to be what we're doing in Rec Comp courses. We're supposed to be giving these students rhetorical savvy, the ability to gauge a situation and decide what the most persuasive way of speaking or writing will be, right? This is much more narcissistic. It's much more writer and speaker based, where the point is I'm going to express myself and stick it to the man, as opposed to I'm going to think about the rhetorical situation and act accordingly. So
So what do you think that they want to see in the classroom? Is just shuffling around some form of authoritarian moral standing, or?
What they really want is something I also really want, just to not degrade students for not speaking or writing in a standard form of English. This is an attitude thing, right? Steve Krashen called it an effective filter. There's a way of going about teaching these things. And you don't have to always let the student know there's something wrong with you because you don't do this yet, right? Black English is inherently wrong. That's bad, right? So this is an attitudinal, situation to me, and studies have shown, and other scholarship has also shown that, the professor's attitude is everything. How the professor is going about helping students grasp the language of wider communication, right? Doing it with respect for that student, as opposed to looking at that student as deficient, inherently deficient in a certain way, right? So it's attitudinal. And the fact that, well, let me say this. I think a lot of this has to do with, respectability, esteem, right? Mm-hmm. Black dignity.
Okay.
Things like that, and forget about the pedagogical logistics, right? We're going to stand up for, Black pride and things like that. Assuming that students have issues with Black pride, assuming that students listen. I didn't need my first year composition professor to tell me to be Black, to be proud to be Black.
Okay.
I didn't need my instructor to tell me to be proud to be Black. Right, I already had that. I needed to know parallelism, and an effective counter argument. That's what I needed.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? So there's this assumption by Black and white professors that the students of color are all downtrodden, injured, and they need us to acquire some self-esteem.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that's entirely the case.
So while we back up again, and I would like to know your trajectory and how you got into this particular field. You want to walk us through how you ended up doing this work?
Oh, in the field. Wow. That's a long and complicated story. Rhetoric,
right?
Yes. I went into graduate school at the University of Illinois, Chicago, in an MA program in American literature. And I felt like I was spinning my wheels a little bit. This is interesting stuff, but what am I really doing with it? Yeah. The department at the time was pretty well known in what was called language literacy and rhetoric. And that was his own program that studied language, but also studied, the meaning making, right? The creation of ideologies and discourse communities and things like that.
Yeah.
I was attracted to that. That had me all over it. So I finished my master's degree and went into the PhD program in language literacy and rhetoric. And that's where I am right now. And so far, so good. I like it.
Yeah. Wait, so you are working on your doctorate at this point?
No. I've had a doctorate for almost 20 years.
Okay.
I'm a lot older than I look.
Good genes.
Yeah,
you've been in the academy for decades then?
Yeah, I guess so.
And how do you see it changing right now? Because that's kind of why you reached out to me. You wanted to talk about the infiltration of anti-racism as an ideology into your field, but how is that situated within the broader academic project? And how does standing up to it in this field potentially affect the other fields?
Okay, yeah, there are a couple of questions there. I'll start with the easier one.
Okay.
How anti-racism is manifesting in the field.
Yeah.
I say this often, and I'll keep saying it. The Venn diagram of activist and scholar is not a single circle, right? They are two overlapping circles,
Okay.
right? And there are certain situations where they will effectively overlap. You can be simultaneously a scholar and an activist. And there are some times when they are antithetical to one another. I guess I can kind of answer the other question with this anecdote that explains the activist scholar situation.
Yeah.
I am part of a listserv called the Writing Program Administrators Listserv, in which rhetoric professors, administrators can post all kinds of things, calls for papers, calls for conferences, just general information. And in the recent past, it was a place where we could have conversations as well. There was a talk at a recent conference called College Composition and Communication, the keynote talk, as a matter of fact, which talked about the problem of white language supremacy. Okay. And talked about the problem of white bodies as inherently, injurious. Yes. Privilege, yes, but also a kind of emotional violence just by being present.
Just like emanating off of the white body.
Apparently.
That's like that superhero power or something like that. It's like kryptonite.
Well, I think a lot of people see it that way, right? I mean, there's a self-projected infantilization going on here that does see white people as this superhero entity, and we're the poor, mortals or something like that, and they have the power to do something like that. One of the lines in the speech. I'm paraphrasing here, but students of color are suffocated by whiteness, right? Just the mere presence of people. I took issue with that because A, it's infantilizing, right? B, I mean, how do you solve that situation? It's not solvable, and I think that's purposeful, right? And C, I don't know how generative it was. I don't really know the point of that statement. Was that supposed to just wake people up to the issue so that they can start thinking about it? Was it to guilt people into doing certain things? What was the actual point of that? So I expressed these issues on the aforementioned listserv. It did not go over well.
Oh, no.
Oh yes. It did not go over well. And, I was called, basically a white supremacist by white people, which is a real, I was going to say mind fuck. Can I say that?
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
Were they aware of your race, or they were just attacking your ideas? Okay.
They're aware.
Okay.
They're very aware. So with that, all kinds of different essays, podcasts came out responding to the racism in this thread. Now, the racism in the thread was me, right? I was a black dude trying to say, listen, this is a very disempowering form of anti-racism. Let's create a more empowering form of anti-racism. That was the racism.
Weird.
Right? So, and here's the thing.
Yeah.
In two podcasts and one publication, this racist listserv thread was brought up, but nobody explains what was racist.
Okay.
Nobody references me at all, let alone, divulges the fact that I'm black.
Yeah.
That's all left out of it. Why is that left out of it? Because in that situation, those authors, those podcasts, hosts and guests and things like that were primarily activists and not scholars.
Okay, yeah.
Right? An activist has an agenda, has a goal, and he or she is going to do whatever it takes to get there.
Yeah.
A scholar acknowledges what's going on and deals with it, the social reality of the situation.
Mm-hmm.
I think. I'm sorry.
No, continue, please.
Okay. And they realized, I think, that if they did recognize my race and what I was actually saying, it would have weakened the narrative, right?
Yeah. Well,
it would have weakened their entire point. So instead of just talking about it and dealing with it and having a real conversation about what really happened, they left out a significant part of what was going on, right?
Well, so what do you think the point is if it needs to ignore that particular truth or the reality or the facts of the matter? What do you think that they're trying to accomplish?
I'm not entirely sure.
Okay.
If they're trying to accomplish pedagogical innovation, again, the logistics aren't really there. There is an author named Asao Anyway who talks about anti-racist pedagogy, but in doing that, he tends to demonize. I articulate this better in my book, but he tends to demonize things like reason, critical thinking, and self-reliance, individuality, and things like that.
Okay.
What's more, he also has, a book on labor-based grading, which I'm not going to talk about now. I think there are some merits to that. So he is trying to do something, legitimate with pedagogy, but his other stuff on anti-racism, I think, not just misses the mark, but is very essentialist. Right.
In what way? In reducing
all black students are the same person.
Okay. Yeah.
Black people are the Borg. Apparently, we're this hive mind that we see the world in the same way, and a lot of anti-racism is based on that assumption. That we all agree that the world is this way and we need to change it to whatever.
Yeah.
Right. Which is not the case. So that's another form of erasure, really. Right. Mm-hmm. Not just erasing me individually, but now you're erasing swaths of a particular race because they don't fit the narrative.
Do you think that there might be some justification for doing that as a form of just a short-term reversal of fortunes in order to achieve a better balanced future eventually? I thought about that, but then I think about a lot of anti-racist ideology that says that white people are always racist and always will be, and they need to be checked on that. John McWhorter calls it a religion, right? There's a religiosity to this, the sacred victim, and to be white is to always have that original sin, right? So there's no real end to this. Right. And apparently, I haven't read it, but D'Angelo's white fragility gets into that as well. Yeah. So I don't think, the whole, this is a short term thing so that in the long run we can figure some things out and come back together and reassess things. I don't think that's the case. I don't think there is an ending in sight. Do you think that there might perhaps be, and you mentioned your book, so you're writing a book about, or you have a book about to come out, or you have a book that has come out. And that's The Critique of Antiracism in Rhetoric and Composition. Have you analyzed anti-racism in its rhetorical functionings and how it operates, how it spreads? Can you give us some insights into that level of the ideology? Identity politics originated as a pretty good idea. The Combahee River Collective, a group of black, predominantly lesbian activists, decided that identity politics, was taking one's identity and what one can get out of the situation as the salient aspect of the activism, while working with other people, right, from different groups towards a similar goal. Right? That was originally identity politics. It's a lot more insular these days. Right? Yeah. Lanes. What's that? There's a lot of lanes now that you're supposed to stay in. Tons of lanes. Yeah. And
So instead of talk about identity politics, I talk about something called the primacy of identity, right? I don't want to, disrespect the Combahee River Collective by using identity politics. It started out well. Now I talk about the primacy of identity, which is the prevalence of lived experience over,
yes, abstract thinking, reason.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And you can combine those things, of course.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's a tendency to think because I said so is a valid argument. And that's because of, lived experience and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's also essentialism, the idea that everybody of a certain race looks at the world a certain way, right? A certain similar way.
Yeah. Or right. is treated by the world in a certain similar way.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And although there are definitely similarities. I mean, Black people do have some things in common, when it comes to, America and its racist tendencies, right? But that doesn't mean we're interpreting things the same way, and that doesn't mean we have the same plans for dealing with that racism and ending that racism, right?
Yeah.
There is a narcissism that I talked about earlier with the primacy of identity. It's not about audience consideration, which is supposed to be a fundamental aspect of rhetoric, right? I'm going to gauge the situation and speak accordingly. It's I'm going to express myself, or you're going to deal with it, right?
Yeah.
And there's a place for that.
Yeah.
And discerning what that place is a rhetorical strategy. You're looking at this situation and acting accordingly. Mm-hmm. That seems to be ignored when it comes to the primacy of identity. Mm-hmm. So there is that's what I see as the rhetoric of anti-racism. And all that comes out of a lack of empowerment. And I define empowerment from, the psychological discipline and its empowerment theory. And that form of empowerment has three components. The first one is intrapersonal, which is basically how we speak to ourselves, how we regard ourselves, our self-efficacy, right? Positive self-regard.
And what's tied to that?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's different from self-esteem. Self-esteem, you can not be great but think you're great, right? Positive self-regard is looking at yourself honestly. What are my strengths, my weaknesses, and going forth from there. And I tie this in with emotional intelligence as well. The intrapersonal is about self-management, right? Motivation, things like that. The next component is the interactional, which is critical awareness of one's surroundings, and based on that awareness, discerning the best way to collaborate with others, to converse, right? To figure out what values you share with people, which ones you don't, and how to negotiate those things. The behavioral is the third and last component of empowerment. And that is basically just looking at the structures that are already put up in society and using those to achieve something. Running for office, right? Writing grants, mm-hmm. right? Changing policies in an education system or something like that, right? So you need all three of those to be truly empowered, right? So I see a lack of that in a lot of anti-racist initiatives. And because of that lack, we do the primacy of identity. We fall back on lived experience because we're afraid that anything else will be easily scrutinized, and therefore, not tossed aside, but not taken as seriously as people would like. Mm-hmm. I think, ignoring my presence in the aforementioned listserv was a lack of empowerment, right? To acknowledge that, right, is to put the movement at jeopardy, right? So we're not going to do that. And I believe that somebody who has those three components of empowerment would do that and then seek ways of improving the overall situation, right?
Yeah, analyzing your axioms and your principles and updating them to new input.
Right.
Basically.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's the premise of this book. And, you know.
Do you think that this, what you're describing now, this movement that you're describing now, do you think that it can be stable? Because we're watching it grow and spread and take over things, but do you think that it will form some sort of static thing, or is it going to collapse on itself without that empowerment, without individuals' honesty and cooperation?
I think it will collapse, yes. I think without the this mode of empowerment or something close to it, it won't have a leg to stand on after a while. Right now, there's a lot of performance going on. In the book, I call it prefigurative politics.
Okay.
Initially, prefigurative politics was a good thing. You act out the world you want to see as you're strategically bringing that world to fruition, right? Yeah. Occupy Wall Street tried to do prefigurative politics. They, the camps where this is the world we want to see. This is the collaboration, and the, lateral leadership, that we want to see in the world, right? Too many instances of prefigurative politics, though, stop with the performance. The performance is enough. In this bubble, everything's okay. So we're just going to stay in this bubble. And if people try to come into this bubble, we're going to degrade them or, pressure them into seeing things our way and sticking around, right? So it's a lot of performance going on. Yeah. I think anti-racism, in most of its manifestations in my field anyway, is a performance, is an aspect of prefiguration, right? And not a genuine and strategic way of bringing about equity and change and unity and diversity and all that great stuff.
Mm-hmm. Right? Do you have a positive vision of what that would look like, what equity, or could you define equity and how you think that it would be a good thing to implement?
Well, it seems like common sense to me, give everyone the same opportunities, right, to achieve, give them the tools to achieve, and do not hinder their path to success, right? Allowing life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness to everybody, not just in lip service like it's been for, centuries, in this country, right? That's what it looks like to me. But I think there's a lot of making up for past transgressions going on here, right? That is getting in the way of actual equity.
Okay. Do you have, why did you choose to put your eggs in the basket of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, even if that hasn't been actually the case? Like, why do you still believe in that, even if there's, let's just say, 400 years of oppression or 240 years of oppression? Why do you?
If you have let's say, Maserati, and you're racing that Maserati, you got a race team and things like that, and all your drivers seem to be crashing this car way too soon, and not really finishing the race. Do you get rid of the Maseratis? Do you find better drivers? Right? Those were bad drivers. They weren't practicing what they were preaching.
Okay.
I think we're at a point right now where people have sufficiently gone to driving school, right? They know what's going on, and they are open, to, having these basic principles of the American creed available to everybody. Now, it's not perfect yet, but we're getting there. And I think the main point is not to throw out the Eurocentric baby with the bathwater, right? It's to make sure that these things are actually used in their proper ways. A lot of people who call themselves decolonial thinkers, are rightly doing their best to critique things that are considered right or the perfect way of doing things because they're part of, modernity and what we think about it, right? And they're right to critique that and push back a little bit. Some people just want to throw everything out. There was and forgive me, I'm not, the National History Museum of African American History, the National Museum of African American History, sorry.
Yeah.
Had that infographic.
Yeah.
In which delayed gratification was a white thing. That's what I'm talking about.
Sorry, it's so big and it's so awful.
No, right.
It's so
the inherent racism in all of this is lost on them. Right? I mean, I can't even say certain things because I'm black. Somebody told me that I don't understand the harm I'm doing with my black body by wanting this empowerment. And that, okay, suddenly my body's not mine.
Yeah.
My body belongs to a movement.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm not an individual anymore.
Well, how do you effectively resist such a Borg-like mindset that is like, these people are willing to disregard facts, to play around with, what's actually going on to get their way. So you just let it continue, or like, what are the effective strategies?
Well, for me, it's to exist and keep saying what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. There's not, I may have written a book, but there's not a lot I'm saying that's particularly profound, right? I mean, I'm pointing out that the emperor has no clothes.
Yeah.
And as the story tells us, a child can do that. So I'm not, I'm not this innovative genius. I'm just somebody saying, hey, he's not wearing any clothes, and I'm willing to keep doing that. Secondly, and I mean, I'm black. If a white person did this, there would be a mob of pitchforks and torches chasing him or her out of town, right? That mob is there for me, but they're not as numerous or not as powerful.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, they don't have that. Right. Yeah. So, how do you empower those who are the silent majority, who know that they can't speak up? What are they to do? Because academia is filled with these people who are just acting like sheep now and allowing these radicals to basically capture scholarship.
Some people are acting like sheep, the grandstanders, the virtue signalers. I know some of them all too well. Other people want to speak up, but they have precarious job situations. They don't have tenure. They have adjunct status, and they don't want to rock the boat, and I understand that. I am the moderator for an online group called Heterodox, Rhetoric and Composition. The Heterodox Academy has various subgroups based in academic disciplines and some geographically. I think there's a Heterodox New York City, but I'm the moderator of that, and that is a space where people can go and have these conversations and talk about these things without fear of being ostracized or mobbed on social media or something like that.
Yeah.
And when I announced the existence of this group on the aforementioned listserv that caused all this trouble, I got some pushback there too, but that was expected.
What's the content of the pushback?
Well, they think the Heterodox Academy, even that term, heterodoxy, the term viewpoint diversity, they are all Trojan horses for white supremacy.
Okay.
So you're saying, okay, you want a diversity of viewpoints. You want people to be able to say what they want to say, or to ask questions, to ask for clarity, to ask for elaboration. But really, you just want to open the door for more white supremacy and racism.
Okay.
Right. So that's what is going on there, and that is why dialogue and debate are both on their deathbeds, because those things open the door for the idea that they may be wrong. Scrutiny goes against the fortification of a cult.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they gotta get rid of that.
How do you think? What is your viewpoint of that suddenly being par for the course of the academy? Like, what do you think is the origin of that and how it crept?
I mean, is it par for the course for the academy? I know there are places like Evergreen. You know, I know there are places like what happened at Yale, which is similar. I don't know. This seems like a loud minority, okay, right? As opposed to, and a silent majority is just, I don't know, waiting for the storm to pass. I don't know.
Okay.
But I think a lot of this, especially this year, nobody wants to be on the wrong side of history here.
Yeah.
Right? So people are deferring to people of color, right? To lead the way towards true equity. Unfortunately, some of those people of color are doing something that does more harm than good to people of color, like inadvertently promoting Black fragility, an infantilized way of being, right? A complete lack of agency to anybody with a minoritized body, right? As if it's hopeless and all we can do is make white people, get out of the way and silence themselves, and then everything will be okay. I can't stand that idea, and too many people have it. The lack of empowerment, all these things going on. I just got so angry right now that I forgot your question.
That's fine. I want to know, if you will allow me this question, and you can deny me, but why are you so angry? Why does this matter? Like, what are the fundamental core ideas, and why are you standing your ground on these things? Why is it important that human beings, for you, have personal empowerment, honesty, and the ability to reason beyond their lived experience? Like, why is that so rooted in your identity or your individuality?
I grew up, I'm going to tell you a story.
Please.
I grew up in a predominantly white neighborhood, and they let me know it.
Okay.
On a regular basis, right? They were, quite racist, the kids and the adults, and I had to deal with that. But what I noticed, and I noticed this at a young age, like, they're bad people, right? The people who were treating me that way. I'm not inferior. They're just awful, and I'm fine.
Okay.
Right? So that's the kind of attitude I had. But I also wanted to get out of it, right? It still hurt. So I wanted to get out of it. So after graduating the 8th grade, we went to a regional high school that was much more diverse. It was pretty much 50-50 black and white, with other races and ethnicities in there, right? Obviously not entirely 50-50. And I said, okay, this is my chance. I'm going to find my people, and all this is going to end. And I found, the other black students, played on a basketball team with them and things like that. And they weren't my people. I was too white to them.
Oh, no.
Right? So now I'm getting rejected by both parties.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this whole allegiance to a group or things like that, it's not about critical thinking. It's about status, attitude, group esteem, things like that. I want to think for myself. I want to make sure that I utilize reason and rationality and critical thinking instead of going with the party line of my group, right? I'm going to be that person. And, so, and that motivated a lot of my academic pursuits, but now it's happening here. Mm-hmm. Now it's happening here. And I'm like, I got to do something about this.
Yeah.
The book I just showed you was a very different book originally. When that listserv thread happened, where I announced that I was seeing a lot of disempowerment here, and then they responded in ways that were indicative of disempowerment,
yeah,
I decided to totally revamp this book with 4 months to go before its due date.
Oh, no.
I do not recommend that to anybody. I'm sure years have been taken off my life. It's not psychologically healthy, but I had to do it. You know, I was seeing this idea. I mean, it says the semblance of empowerment here, because I'm talking about the lack of empowerment, or the semblance of it.
Okay, yeah.
In anti-racism. And to give you an indication of how much the book changed, it wasn't about empowerment. Right? I had to revise certain things, certain chapters, add entire chapters.
Yeah.
Right? In order to get this book, because I felt it was that important. You know, and long story short, you know, I see, you know, this is going to sound dramatic, but the death of freedom in
okay.
academia, and I don't want that.
The death, could you define freedom and how it's embattled right now? What do you mean by freedom?
Well, if you say certain things, well, if you are certain people, that's bad. If you say certain things, that's also bad. This manifesto that came out yesterday, there's a section that talks about, acceptance practices of journals and things like that, and what you should accept and what you shouldn't. Who should be cited in certain texts and who shouldn't.
Oh,
right?
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's a slippery slope, my friend. And I just want to make sure that, you know, the snowball doesn't get so big that it can get taken out of town. Right? And
yeah,
that seems to be happening, and they are serious. You know, they're not playing around.
So you don't think it's performative? You don't think that particular sheet is performative?
Well, it is performative because, well, two things, right? The people don't have to listen to them, right? And two, a lot of what they're talking about, there's no logistic basis. You know, what exactly are you asking for here? How is this going to change pedagogy other than having a better attitude towards non-standard Englishes? Other than that, what's going on? So in a sense, it is performative. In a sense, it's just, and this is my opinion here, it's just saying, we're going to push back on you. We're angry. And we just want to show you how angry we are.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay. Yeah.
That's the main purpose.
Okay.
Which is kind of childish.
But if they're going after, okay, so if it is a performance, it shouldn't be taken seriously, is what you're saying. But there's a lot of social pressure to take it seriously. How powerful are these people, even if they are throwing a tantrum?
One person is the current chair of college composition and communication. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, there's some power there. But others, I mean, I wouldn't say they're so powerful that they can affect my career or anything like that, or anybody's. But they have taken it upon themselves to speak for all black people. Mm-hmm. And when that happens, a lot of well-meaning white people say, okay, well, this must be what all black people want because this is the official statement, of, let's see here. What are they? There's a name they have for themselves.
Is it an acronym or is it something clever?
I think it's kind of clever.
Like the Birds of Ascendant Dawn or something like that?
No, it's not a sci-fi novel. Let's see here. Where is it? I'll get to you in... Oh, yes. The statement is called, this ain't another statement, this is a demand for black linguistic justice.
Okay.
The group, I can't believe I can't find it right now. I'll get it to you in a second. Let's just move on.
Yeah. So, what are ways to creatively counter this? Rhetorically, let's say. What are some of the methods of, approaching these demands to take the wind out of their sails or to expose them for what they are? Because that's kind of what I do part-time, so I'm looking for tips, tricks, and expertise.
I will answer that, but first I found the name of the committee. The Special Committee on Composing a College Composition and Communication Statement on Anti-Black Racism and Black Linguistic Justice, or Why We Can't Breathe.
Oh, no.
Yes, and in fact, the initial announcement for this totally used George Floyd as a way of getting into this. So, I mean...
Okay. What's your reaction to that?
I don't know yet. It's so new.
Okay.
I mean, I've talked to some people, and they find it relatively tasteless. But 2 months ago, somebody used or talked about a conversation about George Floyd to open up a conversation about ad hominems in conversation, right? Okay. I mean, is saying I don't understand because I'm white, this is what this person was saying, an ad hominem, or is it something we should interpret differently, right? And he wanted to open up that conversation.
Interesting.
He was destroyed for using George Floyd as a discussion prompt for something else. This comes out in which he's using George Floyd. He actually uses a metaphor that, teaching standard English is like having your knee on black people's necks. That is said there.
Yeah.
That is, even metaphorically, that's in bad taste.
Yeah.
But nothing's going to happen.
Yeah. Because he's on the right side of the cancel knife, I guess.
Yes. So you asked me questions before.
Well, this is one frustrating thing about this particular movement is that laterally, if you just look at all their different statements, they contradict themselves constantly.
Yeah.
But teleologically, it makes sense if you assume that they want power.
Right. And that's where the activist over scholar comes in, right? It's all about the telos.
Yeah.
It's not about looking at things. It's not about acknowledging my existence as the racist voice in that thread that is the subject of 2 podcasts and an article.
Yeah.
Right? That mode of scholarship is too dangerous to the movement at large. Right? So, I mean, there is that. Again, pointing it out, being vocal about it is one way of doing this. But another way is pedagogical. I mean, they're talking about a lot of classroom practices and things like that. I see problem-based learning as a way of addressing this. Problem-based learning is when students work on a project that is authentic. There is an actual client, in the real world that they're working for. My students have done marketing strategies for people, right, mostly. And
that's called problem-based learning?
Problem-based learning, or PBL.
Okay.
And the point of this is to look at the social reality, look at the reality of the situation, and speak or write based on that. So there may be a client or a situation within that client's social workings, right, that will dictate to the students that they should use Black English, right? That could happen. Or they could use something more in line with code-meshed English, Black and standard English.
But, footnote, are you allowed to do that as a white person, or is that you're not allowed to do that? So you need to hire a Black person to write that copy for you under the dictates of a cultural appropriation, right?
Well, that's another thing. That's a whole other topic.
Okay, but it's there. I just want to say that whole clip is there.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
It's there.
Okay.
But theoretically, if the students decide that that's the best way to go about things, then they will go about it in that way. I have yet to have a group decide that a language of wider communication or something like what we're using right now isn't the best way to go for certain situations. Now, that's not to say that standard English is better than any other dialect.
Well, it's all about being effective. It's not a value judgment, other than utilitarian, I guess.
Yes. It's effective, it's utilitarian, but to anti-racist proponents, like the ones who wrote this and other people, it's a value judgment.
Yeah.
First and foremost. That's what it is. Right?
All right.
So as long as it's a value judgment, it's racist. If it's utilitarian and pragmatic, well, it's utilitarian and pragmatic. And that's what PBL does. It has the students gauge the rhetorical situation and speak or write accordingly.
Yeah.
And I think PBL is powerful because it looks at reality. It's not a contrived classroom situation, right? I'm not giving them an assignment I made up. The assignment's real, right? It's in an actual society with real people, real stakeholders, and they have to do their best to be as persuasive as possible.
Mm-hmm. So and plus, you get a cut if they do good, right?
No, I do not.
Okay. You mentioned something. I want to explore this, or if you have any thoughts on this. It seems that what we're describing now, this movement, is attempting to turn the entire world into a morality play in a way. What are some precedents for that, or what are some aspects of when a group of discourse or a group discourse is based so thoroughly on a moral landscape or process like this?
Besides talking about the Salem witch hunts, I don't really know. I don't really have an answer for you regarding that. I don't know.
Is that some way for us to make sense of why contradiction doesn't matter, and to push it a little further than just saying that it's activist scholar contention, but there's some sort of manifest social dynamic. Do you have any thoughts on that, or within a linguistic community, like kind of how that shapes discourse?
Like you said earlier, it's teleological, right? It's all about the end point. And this by any means necessary activism will, skirt certain things that were inherently academic before, like not hiding research that doesn't align with your narrative. Mm-hmm. I don't have any solid examples from history, right, about what you're talking about. But I mean, in cultic studies, studies of cults and things like that, punishment for heresy is called dispensing with existence. Right? And what that means is, silencing or erasing somebody who has a loud voice. Right. I mean, yeah. They pretended I wasn't, on that listserv thread. And that is a common practice of cults. We're just going to pretend this person isn't here.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. Now, many people have used the cult metaphor before. Some people will say it's not a metaphor, right? Yeah. So that's nothing new. But, when I was doing my own research, I found that very telling. That, cancel culture is, dispensing of existence, right? Dispensing existence.
So in your book, is it structured with kind of like some sort of, here's the state of things, where do we go now? Or is it kind of just basically a wake-up call? Do you have any solutions or answers or,
It's basically a wake-up call. Other than problem-based learning, which I introduced in the book's conclusion, right? It's really just, exposing the problem, right? And I take the whole book to do that mostly. Mm-hmm. And maybe the next book will be about a solution.
Yeah.
But the initial book, the book I was writing before this, kind of, it questioned understandings of identity in the self, right? And, are we essential people? Are we socially constructed? And if we are, what does that say about identity politics? About the essentialism that happens in what I'm calling a primacy of identity. What does all that say? I mean, I dip into Buddhist philosophy, and it was a very different book.
Yeah.
Some of that makes it into this. But my idea was that, you can't offer a cure to somebody who doesn't know he's sick, who isn't convinced that he's sick in the first place. So this is the diagnosis, and maybe the next book will be a proposed cure.
So what would you have if you had the power to rewrite our current timeline? What would you think is the proper response to, I guess, using whatever thing happened this year to motivate a conversation around race? What do you think is the proper, things that we should assess as a nation? And, what would you have us focus on both dialogically and maybe in areas of policy or beyond, or in the academy?
I published an op-ed with Newsweek a couple of weeks ago, addressing the fact that a lot of Black activists and activists of color don't want to have conversations with white people who want to be allies because they're tired. You know, there's this line of emotional intelligence that's always coming up.
Yeah.
Right.
Labor and exhaustion.
Right. Labor and exhaustion and things like that. And I say we have to ride this zeitgeist. This is too important of a time. You don't let the banning of the Confederate flag go by without riding that wave. Right.
Okay.
There's some other things that have happened that are comparable to the banning. The Washington Redskins are now the Washington football team. They may get creative later on, but
yeah,
if you would have told me in January that those things were going to happen, I would have called you a liar. You know, we have to jump on this and collaborate, right? And not resegregate. A lot of the logical progression of a lot of what they're talking about, especially this document that came out yesterday, is segregation.
Black schools and white schools.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the logical progression of this. If you keep going with this, that's where we go. Right? I don't know if they see that. But that's what I'm seeing, and I'm not the only one. So
yeah, oddly, for such a teleologically aimed in practice, like they don't want to see where they're going at the same time as doing everything to get there.
Right. That's insane, right? I mean, that's yeah. So it's very confusing. What we need to do now is collaborate, have a heterodox attitude. And what that means is that sometimes people are going to say things out of ignorance that you don't like. We have to deal with that. And so do they. When you say things they don't like. Mm-hmm. We have to get over that. We have to get over either or thinking, either or ontology, right? I am essentially this, you're essentially that, done. We have to get over that. And we have to start having these generative and adaptive conversations.
Yeah, as opposed to uncomfortable.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Sorry, rooted in...
I'm sorry.
I cut you off. I'm sorry. And our audio connection's funky too.
I believe I was saying we have to have adaptive conversations, compare and contrast values, talk about, how we can work together. There's a theorist named Otto Scharmer who calls it presencing. Going into these situations with an open mind, open heart, and an open will. What that means is I may have an idea of what I want to happen here, but I gotta check that at the door and be open to whatever emerges organically, that can benefit all involved. If people come already thinking they're right, they're already thinking they have the solution, they're gonna bump heads more than they're going to collaborate.
Yeah.
Right? So that's what needs to happen. What Scharmer calls presencing, right? Like being there and being open. I think Leotard called it narrative pragmatism. Right? You're going to do what's best for this situation, and then we'll go into the next situation and reopen ourselves. Mm-hmm. Right? I think that attitude is imperative.
So
I'm sorry.
No, go on.
Empowerment, necessitates that, especially the interactive component, which is all about being critically aware of your surroundings and collaborating and speaking effectively with everybody else in those surroundings. Yeah. Right? So.
But if the discourse is controlled by the tantrum makers, what do you do then in that situation? If there's no room for presence because the small group is dominating the conversation? Do you just go to somewhere else and just ignore them, start other conversations?
Some people do that.
Erode their audience that way?
Some people, I had somebody today say, let's just ignore them. They're not affecting us really. Let's just go away. Mm-hmm. And I don't feel comfortable doing that for a couple of reasons. One, they're claiming to represent me and who I am and what I think, and I don't like that. So, and I'm sure I'm not the only one who doesn't like it. And B, I mean, I think when we're here because we ignore things, in my opinion. I think, and I did this. Like 15 years ago, I was like, well, that's silly and makes no sense. That's not going to catch on. And, now
Talking
we're here.
about
And
this,
right.
Yeah, way of thinking.
So I think to leave it alone is not the best thing to do either. I resolved to be as loud as possible about these things and to write more books if I need to, do more talks like this if I need to. Mm-hmm. I'm a part of a Zoom on Friday in which I will be interviewed about the book in front of various people in my field. So things like that, just staying vocal and staying consistent, and letting them realize that there are people of color who don't abide by what they're talking about. Right? Jason Whitlock is one person. We have John McWhorter and Glenn Lowry, mm-hmm. right, who are saying similar things. Right? So just and people are popping up all over the place. Charles Barkley said something recently. I mean, people are. It's starting to. We're starting to see the people of color saying, "Wait a minute, are we thinking this through?" Like that's happening now. So I hope that gains some momentum.
Okay. You were talking about your going from 8th grade to 9th grade and seeing that just seeing yourself as not wanting to be a part of tribalism, I guess. You said specifically that you kind of clung to critical thinking. Who put that idea in your head? Was there what caused you to realize that that was your way forward?
I've always been a big fan of reality. Right?
Well, okay, well, what caused you to be a fan and not a hater of reality?
Well, I would always, and this from both tribes, right? I would always say, wait, that's not happening.
Okay.
Nobody's saying anything insulting right now, all right? Or I didn't do anything, that was specifically black, just then. You're saying that to maintain the difference between my tribe and yours, quote unquote, right? I kept seeing people talk about things that weren't happening, right? And I also saw a lot of people dismissing that critical thinking and reason and things like that because it didn't result in things they wanted to see. Exactly what's going on now. So, I mean, did I call it critical thinking at the time? No. Yeah. But that's what it was. I like Richard Paul, the late philosopher, his definition of fair-minded critical thinking, is basically looking at reality regardless of what you want to see, right? And sophistic critical thinking, based on Plato's enemies, the sophists, right, mm-hmm. is, epistemological rigor insofar as it supports what you want. Right, so that's the truncated kind of critical thinking I think we see a lot in a lot of anti-racist activism. Mm-hmm. But I'm a fair-minded critical thinker. I like to think I am anyway. Mm-hmm. I'm trying. I'm going for that. Other people should go for it too. Yeah,
I stand by you in your pursuit of spreading that across the land. Do you think that we can get to a point where what do you think about the concept of color blindness and not seeing color anymore, and where that's legitimate and where that's not legitimate?
Well, I understand the sentiment behind it. People are saying, I'm going to treat you as a person and I'm not going to let your color get in the way, which is an issue because color shouldn't get in the way in the first place, right? I mean, don't be colorblind. See my color and treat me with respect anyway. Okay, right? That's the issue with color blindness. That being said, I get where people are coming from when they use that term. I always have. But there's that one problem I just gave you, and another problem is that color blindness seems to not look at more structural issues that need to be addressed as well. It's an interpersonal thing as opposed to a social or a systemic thing.
What do you think is the most pressing systemic thing that we should be focusing on while the attention is on the disparity of, I guess, the black community in America? Like what? What's some tangible thing that you think should be pinpointed and addressed?
I think there's a large socioeconomic element to this, right? There's a disparity of inner city schools to private schools, suburban schools, things like that. Poverty is a substantial issue here, right? I'm not going to say that culture is a substantial issue and people need to change their cultures. I'm not going in that direction. I think if people are less precarious, if they have less precarious lives, they won't do things out of necessity that may get them in trouble or actually be a detriment to their lives and the lives of others, right? I think people need a socioeconomic secure base, and a lot of these things will take care of themselves.
Where do you lean on dealing with that issue?
What do you mean?
Do you think like more social programs, more education, more, some form of redistribution of resources in order to lift up communities, or entrepreneurialism, or a kind of capitalist-based solutions? I
lean towards the entrepreneurial, and that's the first time I've said that out loud.
Oh, no.
Because I've been trying to figure things out myself, but I have a colleague, not at this institution, but in the field, who sees entrepreneurship as a mode of social justice. Teaching students to be enterprising, right, with what they're doing, even whether it's making money or not, right? Just giving them that agency, that power, that empowerment, right? That's I see that happening there. So I lean more towards that. I think financial literacy should be centered more than it is right now, right? There are people who, have knowledge that others don't, and that's why they have more money than others don't. They're not geniuses. They know where to put their money and when and why.
Yeah.
So that's also a situation I see. Regarding the redistribution of things, reparations and things like that, I'm of two minds about that. I mean, you can fund certain things, defund one thing and put it someplace else, and say that's a kind of reparations. I don't know, and that I kind of get, but I think reparations would be a big problem because it wouldn't solve everything, and we still have social problems, and we still say, hey, we need help over here. And the powers that be may say, we gave you all that money. Get out of here.
Yeah.
It's over. We paid you. Now it's your problem, right?
Yeah.
Money's not going to solve everything. So I'm wishy-washy when it comes to reparations. I'm still trying to figure out what I think about it.
Are you, how has teaching been during the time of COVID for you? How have you been faring?
I was on sabbatical.
Oh, well, there you go.
I mean, it's a blessing and a curse.
The world followed you there.
Well, I had a lot of trips I couldn't go on anymore. So that's bad. Also, everybody else had to learn on the fly about this. I'm still learning how to teach online, and the semester is 2 minutes away. So,
yeah.
I'm kind of freaking out about that, but I'll figure it out. But yeah, I was on sabbatical. I didn't deal with any of that.
Cool. I want to ask you a wrap-up question, maybe about rhetoric. I love it. What do you think? Why do you think it's important for people to learn this? What is it, and why do you think that it's an essential part of an education?
I have a deep theoretical answer to that has to do with concepts of consubstantiality and Buddhist concepts of dependent origination. I will just say this. When trying to effectively communicate with somebody, you have to do two things. You have to listen rhetorically, right? And what that means is just, putting aside what you think and accepting that person and what that person is trying to say. And you have to have a level of empathy, even if it's cognitive empathy and not emotional empathy, to figure out why this person's saying that, right? What the person's saying, why the person is saying it. I think those are two integral parts of effective communication. And that's why I believe in rhetorical studies. That's the short version.
It sounds like the basis of civilization. what you're describing there.
Yeah, again, I'm not saying anything profound.
Okay.
Just this is it.
Well, cool, Erec. Is that Zoom call going to be open to the public, or is there other things that I can plug or you would like to plug for my audience?
I don't know if it's open to the public. I think certain individuals can get invited and things like that. Okay. And I can look into that and get back to you about it. But as far as other things to plug, no, not really. I just, I like opportunities to speak, right, and say what I need to say.
Is that the real reason you got into Rhetoric? So you can talk?
To talk about rhetoric, yes.
Yeah, okay.
To be rhetorical about rhetoric.
Yeah, I love it. I'll end the recording there, and thanks for your time.
Thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk about this.
Yeah.
I don't know if I was as articulate as I wanted to be, but I think I got my point across.
Yeah. It's a journey. You're getting. Yeah. You've done several of these, right? Or one or two?
One or two, yeah.
That's cool.
So, all right, thank you. And let me just say, I appreciate your work and everything you're doing. The real evergreen, the complete evergreen story. I mean, it's riveting.
Did you get a chance to check it out?
Yeah, I watched all the episodes so far. I mean, I just couldn't. I was up to like 4 a.m, man.
Really?
And and yeah, I'm dealing with similar sentiments.
Yeah.
So
my aim is to try to show, and I don't know if they'll listen, but trying to show like that, okay, the kids acted crazy, like absolutely crazy, but one step down is the teachers, and there's a direct connection to that behavior and these ideas. So
with me, it's flipped. The teachers are acting crazy, and down here are the students who are like, I'm not being oppressed. I just want to learn how to use a comma.
Yeah, exactly.
So
I think most kids want that. It's such a shame. It's educational malpractice. They're wasting the resources of this generation on these performative, authoritarian regimes.
I agree. Yeah. So here we are. Let's fight the good fight.
Yeah, will do, Erec. Thanks a lot for your afternoon. I hope you have a good evening.
Yeah, you too. And thanks again.
Yeah. Ciao. Congratulations for reaching the end of the podcast. If you enjoyed this product, consider donating to this channel via paypal.me/Benjamin Boyce or joining me on Patreon. Also follow me on Twitter at Benjamin A. Boyce. Have a good night.